Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt and
With me today is abundance teacher and money coach, JodieLynn Craven.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. And of course, JodieLynn, we are recording this as the last episode before Christmas 2023. So we're in the midst of the holiday season. About the last thing anybody ever thinks about in the midst of the holiday season is dieting. Usually this is a time for feasting and for pies and cakes and all kinds of stuff. And then they think about it afterward. We thought we'd kind of flip the tables a little bit here. We're going to think about it during the holiday season. You kind of get a little bit of a leap forward on this before the holidays totally collide with us and collapse us.
Well, and I disagree with your statement, Walt. I think that for me, it's always been, I think more and more about dieting as I'm going through the Christmas season. Like I shouldn't be eating that. I should go on a diet.
So it's the guilt trip. Okay, yes, I got it.
Absolutely. So it's top of mind. I'm just not listening to, that little voice that's like, you probably shouldn't have one more turtle.
I guess we all have our different ways of torturing ourselves during the holidays. So that's a good one. I like that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So our guest today is Maura Rodgers. She's a registered dietitian and a self-described foodie. That summarizes the topic right there, doesn't it? Right? Because we've been talking about being foodies, and she's also going to bring the dietary part of that into it.
Yeah.
How she's going to combine that together, I don't know. We're going to have to find that part out.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear more about that because diet and foodie rarely go in the same sentence.
That's right. We've got it in the same title. I mean, that's really something. That's kind of like a landmark right there. So, Maura, thank you for joining us today. How you doing, first of all?
Yeah, I'm doing so great. How are you two?
We're doing great. Yeah.
Awesome.
So, registered dietitian, that's a career choice that requires some education, certification, work, all kinds of stuff to get there. You have to really be committed to doing that. So the first question I want to ask about is, how did that come about? Like, why did you decide to go that route?
It's a great question. I have loved food since I started eating as a baby. And
well, you were an early adopter, is that it?
I was a big fan since day one. And I was also very fortunate to be raised in a household where healthy, nourishing food was very much a priority and something that my parents really instilled as something that we should appreciate and celebrate. It wasn't something that, there was no stress around eating either. So we enjoyed our cake, we enjoyed ice cream, but we really focused on quality as much as we could. And I never realized just how much that impacted my ability to live my life until I graduated high school. And I just realized I could maybe study nutrition. That was an option. And once I dove into it, I was just I never turned back. It's something that I'm so passionate about. I love food. I love celebrating food. I think it's something that, everyone in the world has in common. It's something we experience every single day, and it has the power to change every cell in our body and therefore every part of our life. But it's gotten a bad reputation, especially as a dietitian. I've gone through quite a bit of schooling, and the traditional way of training dietitians is to really focus on dieting. And, that's in the title of, what I am. But right. I think there's a new wave of practicing as a dietitian that embraces more mindful and intuitive eating techniques and really strays away from diet culture. Because what we're finding with diet culture is the statistics or success rate is so poor. That's why there's a million diets out there. It's a massive industry, and we're constantly being marketed toward, especially this time of year and are entering January, as something that you really have to kind of restrict and cut back and feel hungrier and cut your calories. But what we know to be true is most diets, regardless of what they are, by 12 months, most people who have lost weight regain that weight back and some. And so not only do they affect your metabolism in a pretty poor way, they're not sustainable, and they also create more rigidity and this black or white way of thinking about food. And so my role, and really what I'm very passionate about, is helping people create a healthier relationship with their food, enjoying all food, giving yourself permission to do that, but not compromising yourself along the way, right? Because I think a lot of the time when we eat certain foods, it doesn't feel very good. So I help people really create that mindful balance where you're nourishing your body, but you're also enjoying what you like and what you enjoy in a very intentional way. So I don't really believe in dieting. I don't really believe in calorie counting, but a lot of my clients are ones who have tried everything, feel very stuck and frustrated and discouraged and just want something that really sticks.
Okay. Well, that sounds encouraging. Sounds hopeful anyway. It doesn't sound a whole lot like fruit cake and pumpkin pie, but we'll have to see where that goes. So, let's talk about that. We're not going to be talking about dieting. We're talking about a healthy relationship with food. Let's talk about what that means. What is that?
Yeah. So, I think that at a very young age, we start to reward ourselves with food, right? When we're really young, I have a 2-year-old. So, what I'm hearing as far as potty training is to give them chocolate or something once they've, gone to the bathroom. And that's not really something that I'm necessarily doing. And there's nothing wrong with people who do that with their kids, but that then becomes like, if you perform well, then, we can get ice cream later. And then when we kind of become adults and we're navigating difficulty in our lives, or we're stressed or overwhelmed or sad, we might go to food as like that source of comfort and satisfaction. It's very understandable. Like our biology really craves and looks to those foods because we know that not only do they taste good, but in the moment we get this euphoric experience in our brain and our body that creates this pattern, this reward loop. So, it's understandable how, especially something that we experience every single day, that we can start to create a slightly complicated relationship with it, right? Because we have to nourish our body. We have to eat to survive, but then it also takes on all these different roles and meanings throughout life. Like a lot of our celebrations center around food. And so it's very easy to kind of, eat more than we're comfortable with at certain times of the year. So what I would say is like a healthy relationship with food is feeling grounded and calm and in control of food, being very aware of how it's impacting your body, how it feels while you're eating it afterward, and not creating a lot of rigidity around it. So creating more flexibility there. So that's at least my approach and my definition.
Okay. And you mentioned food as a reward, which I thought was a great topic to bring up, because certainly I think a lot of us, I think everybody to one extent or another thinks of food as being a reward, somewhat for the reasons that you gave, because of what we're taught, during childhood, and partly because we kind of train ourselves. I mean, it's not like the training stops when you're 18. You just keep going on and on and on and on. One of the things, though, that I've really noticed, particularly lately, I've been paying attention to my own situation, my own body, my own diet, variety of things. I'm health conscious very much lately. I've noticed that you talked about that reward, right? That anticipation of the instant gratification of, the food's going to feel good for a moment. The thing that's interesting to me is I can anticipate that and eat food and not feel it. And it's almost like I got the reward, but I didn't. It's like, it wasn't enough to stop me and say, well, that didn't really pay off. It was more like, I just didn't eat enough.
Yeah. And I think that's what a lot of people find is like, that's why we're not satisfied with half a cup of ice cream, that we can eat the whole pint and we're still kind of looking for something else. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think that's a very common pattern. And something that I would say to you is what your reasonings are behind making that choice. Like, is it due to physical hunger, or is there something else that's kind of knocking at the door? Is it, wanting, like, are you bored? Are you overwhelmed? Do you want to celebrate? Like, what is that? And I think if you can get to that, then it helps you create a little bit more mindfulness around why you do want to make that choice and how much would feel good. And can you explore other things that would actually meet that need a little bit more effectively?
It's actually pretty irritating at times, because I can actually be mindful enough to know, okay, eating this is not going to help. I know I'm not eating it because I'm hungry. I'm eating it because of X, whatever that X is that I'm annoyed by or fearful about or angry about or whatever. But I'm going to do it anyway. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's like an element of rebellion maybe, or just saying like, I don't want to, and I think that's true. And it's not to say that this is true with you, but I'm seeing that for a lot of people who have dieted a lot, or maybe growing up, there were certain messages around what you can and can't eat, that external food rule starts to get annoying. And so your wise voice might say, okay, this may not serve you, it may not actually meet this need. You know, it's going to taste good in the moment, but you might not feel great afterward, or maybe you feel fine throughout. And, but you maybe wake up feeling not so great. Whatever that is, it's sometimes not enough to override that other part of you, that other conversation that you're having that could stem from something else. So I think getting away from food rules is also important, so you can kind of create your own roadmap along the way.
Okay, so if we're not going to do food rules, if it's going to be our own roadmap, what does that look like?
So that's where something called mindful eating and intuitive eating really comes in, which I love. And I know that that sounds like a very fluffy term and something that's not based in science. Like as a dietitian, I've so much of my field is all about science, but I think there's a lot of interesting research that's coming out around the impact and the role that mindful and intuitive eating plays in helping us better understand why we're making certain choices, how much would meet our needs, and drowning out the noise in a sense. Like stop listening to these external rules around like stop eating at 7:00 and you should start fasting and have, like there's a lot of noise, and it's hard and confusing to figure out what makes sense for you or what feels good for you. But a big part of this is also just listening to your body more and better understanding how to manage your emotional needs and tailoring your decision making according to that. And then creating a healthier relationship with food as a result of that. So it's not, I think we might not have enough time to explain exactly what that looks like, just because it's very personalized to every person. But what I really like to focus on is if we can have more confidence in understanding what role nutrition plays in our body, that's a big part of what I teach. And I don't think there's really a point in time where we all get like a crash course on nutrition, because once you understand the basics of how fiber and protein and fats and vitamins and minerals and all these things impact you and influence you, you start to have a little bit more confidence knowing and more buy-in as far as making choices that like allow you to operate at a better place and allow your blood sugars to be stable and energy to be stable. And so I think the recipe that has worked for me is nutrition education coupled with mindful and intuitive eating techniques, where you're focusing on removing the label around certain foods, saying this is good or bad, or I'm good or bad for making this choice. Being really careful about how we talk about ourselves, the belief system we have around food in our body, and the mindset that we have going into celebrations and holidays and things like that. So those two worlds, when they come together, it becomes like a pretty successful process.
Just one thing that I want to gently push back on. I'm actually not pushing back at you. I'm pushing back at sort of a societal norm. But you mentioned that where you've gone as a dietitian that doesn't strictly adhere to scientific standards. And that's what I want to push back on, because I honestly think that trying to limit science to double-blind, placebo-controlled studies is absurd. That's not science. That's one little narrow area that mainstream science has said, okay, this is what all of science is all about. But that's not even true of all of science. There's so much science that actually doesn't even do double-blind, placebo-controlled studies. They just don't. It's not part of it.
Right.
So I think we need to kind of expand our definition and say, wait a minute, science covers a whole lot more than that. Science is about data acquisition and understanding that data and creating creating theories and testing the theories and hypotheses, and then gathering more data to see that's science. Science isn't double-blind, placebo-controlled studies. So I think what you're doing actually is science. I don't want to say that.
Well, thank you. And there is now a lot more research around the impact and the role that mindful and intuitive eating plays. But I think something that I have understood to be a little bit flawed is this idea of calories in and calories out. I think if it were that simple, no one would have a problem with their weight. And that's something that, I was trained as a dietitian to honor and to, put into practice with a lot of my clients and helping them lose weight. But we're finding that when you dramatically cut calories, it can slow your metabolism down and limit your ability to lose weight. Like, when you have a slow metabolism, you burn muscle tissue because you're not eating enough, then that backfires. So I think that simple model is also something that, it's like the tip of the iceberg. There's so many factors that influence your ability to lose weight and maintain it that we just can't oversimplify it by saying, okay, I'm going to stop eating an extra 400 calories today. And by, 2 months from now, I'm going to be at this weight. Like it doesn't work that way.
And I would call that good science, actually. Saying, because basically you said there's a theory or a hypothesis that really isn't proving out. Well, that's science. So, somebody created a hypothesis for a theory. We're testing against the data, and it doesn't seem to match up. Okay, then we're going to change it, or we're going to put that one aside, or evolve it into something else. That's the scientific method. So you're doing great science. Thank you for that.
Well, thank you. Yeah. And I think it's neat to just see a lot of my friends and those who I've gone to school with are also recognizing that we need to kind of expand our definition of what it, how we help people lose weight and really sustain that. So, it's exciting. I love nutrition. I love food, and I want people to feel good in their body and feel good eating. The guilt and the shame, I think that's very common this time of year. And that's also something I really help people with is removing all of that, like the heaviness around making decisions, and then the guilt that we feel and the shame we feel afterward. Cause that doesn't feel great,
Okay. So JodieLynn, this is your cue, right? Cause you were talking earlier about how you make yourself guilty throughout the holiday season. So where do you want to go with the whole topic about guilt and food?
Yeah, one of the questions that was rattling around in my brain is in terms of mindfulness and intuitive eating. Like we're coming into the holidays, it's just a couple days away. So what would be some tips or strategies, or like how do you approach that going into a season where you're going to be with lots of food and lots of people and lots of opportunities to maybe not make mindful decisions? How do you even become mindful of what the right decisions are?
Yeah. Awesome question. And this is, also to your point, Walt, this is such a great time to have this conversation, because I do think there's, this throwing caution to the wind situation that happens toward the end of the year. And then a lot of people start January 1 and say, oh my gosh, I don't feel good in my body and I'm so frustrated, and, do something extreme. And that's something that I would love to prevent and just help people stay a little bit more in the middle instead of going from one extreme to the other. So, great question. And I think there's a lot of very simple but impactful tips and strategies that you can put into practice to make sure that you feel more in control and more intentional going into a lot of variable situations. We're traveling, we're around other people, we're, family and friends. That can sometimes be a little stressful. There's comments that people might make about certain choices that we make, which is not desirable and kind of unwanted attention. There's so much food that we love. Like I love all the same things that everyone else loves. And I think if we can have a game plan going into those moments, it makes a world of difference. And if you can start putting some of these things into practice now, by the time January rolls around, like I feel so much more confident knowing that I was able to advocate for myself or make choices that really were aligned with what I want more of in a very difficult situation. And I think the more you can get those moments under your belt, the more confident you are. And then, if we extrapolate, you can be anywhere in the world, at a wedding, traveling, and you still feel in control of those choices and you walk away feeling great. So if we were to think about some practical strategies, the one thing, there's a couple of things. The first thing that I would say is being really intentional about taking the pressure off from having to capitalize on moments, even though there's tons of yummy food around. So I know that there's maybe certain relatives that might make the best version of something. And let's say Thanksgiving or Christmas or Hanukkah or wherever you celebrate, that one food shows up and all year you're like very eager to eat that thing. And then that really sets you up to just go completely overboard. But if you take a step back and you realize, I could recreate this dish anytime I want, or I could, find like the second best version of this thing that somebody else could make for me, and I could buy it and make it or eat it or have it delivered at any point. That food's never going out of style. We'll always have access to that food. And so if you can just remind yourself of that going into these moments, then you can show up at the buffet and say, you know what, this is amazing. I know it's amazing. I want to enjoy it and like really savor it, sit down, like be really intentional about not inhaling it while you're talking to other people. Like create a moment around it. If it's as good as you know it to be, like create a special moment. As hard as that is when we're catching up with people, but like try to create like a little mini experience so that you actually recall, what does it taste like? What are the textures? Like, is it really as good as you thought it was? Is it better? Is it like slightly not as good? And if you're content with a serving, then maybe saving a little bit more for tomorrow so you can elongate that experience at a time when you're not super full and stuffed, because it doesn't taste as good, I think, when we're so full and then we get a second serving. It's like, I would argue that you get more value out of it if you create, like you enjoy that over multiple days. And then also just reminding yourself, like, you'll always have access to that and you can always recreate it. So yeah, I would say that's a big one.
Amazing. It's so interesting when you were talking at the very beginning of your explanation, it sounded like we have scarcity around
Definitely.
food, which isn't like, I can see that in multiple different times in my life where I was like, oh my God, I need to have this because I'm never going to have it again. And that is absolutely not true. But it's interesting how we set ourselves up to fail in that way, to believe that it's scarce.
Absolutely. And that's such a great point, because it really is shifting. A lot of the mindset work that I do is centered around shifting from this scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset. And that includes travel, vacations, going to Italy, enjoying pasta and pizza, but also knowing, like, you know, you'll always have amazing pizza again. You'll always have incredible pasta again. Don't let that one moment consume you to the point where you walk away not feeling good about your body or feeling good about your choices. And so, you know, allowing this abundance and giving yourself permission to enjoy what you love without any negative emotions tied to that, it just helps you feel so much more in control and intentional. And I would argue that if you can slow down and truly savor that, which is something that I help people with, which is very hard to do, but if you can really savor that and enjoy it, and maybe you might find you're more satisfied with less when you start to practice a lot of mindful and intuitive eating techniques. And then you also might, like, another little tactic that I think can be helpful going into a certain situation is thinking about what is your negotiable and what are your non-negotiables. So an example of this is, if I went to New Orleans a few years ago and I knew that their beignets were amazing, and I love donuts and I had never tried it before. And I found like the best place, or the place that had the highest rating, that was most popular, that offered the best version of that thing I was looking for, because I wanted to try it. That was like a non-negotiable for me. I knew that when I traveled there, I wanted to experience it, and I sat down, I enjoyed it. It was awesome. But then it also helps put into focus, what are those negotiable things? What are those, like, is happy hour drinking on that vacation massively impactful for you? Is it going to transform that experience? Or is that something that you could kind of put to the side and carry on with? You know what I'm saying? So instead of everything being like a must, you start to be more intentional going into that holiday meal or travel or trip to say, what is something that I would get a lot of value out of, that would add a lot to this experience? And what are those other things that are just more neutral that maybe I could pass on?
Mm-hmm. I have another question.
Yeah.
How do you deal with there's actually two questions that I have, and they're kind of related, but number one is, how do you deal with the buffet? Because when I go to a buffet, like especially at someone's house, like when you go to a restaurant buffet, whatever, doesn't matter. But when you're at someone's house, it feels like, or I feel this pressure to take a little bit of everything, because it was a potluck and everybody brought something and they worked hard to make it and whatever it may be. So the only thing that's on my non-negotiable list is the things that I do not like. I won't put those on, but everything else seems to end up on my plate, whether I wanted to eat it or not, but I just feel compelled to put it on my plate.
Good question. And I think this is also very relevant for like the holidays, because a lot of holiday eating is really centered around buffet or potluck style. So you have so many options, and it's almost like analysis paralysis. There's so many things that you just want to try everything. So what I would say, number one thing is avoid going into a buffet starving. That is always a slippery slope. So if you can imagine what it feels to be hungry, like comfortably hungry, but not starving, that's something that you want to aim for. So a lot of people going into a buffet situation would skip breakfast or skip lunch to kind of save up for that meal. But when you get to a point where you're starving, there's no amount of mindfulness that can overpower that desire, like that need for your body to have stable blood sugars, for your brain and your heart and everything to have the fuel that it needs. Because when you're running on empty, you just want a massive amount of food in the fastest period of time. And you also want those high mileage foods like a burger or pasta, those things that are going to pack a punch. So give yourself the gift of nourishment earlier in the day so that you can show up to that buffet a little bit more intentional and kind of going about it in a slightly more calm way. So that's one thing I would say. And then the second thing I would say is if you can scan the buffet line before putting things on your plate, that's huge. So in your mind, you can just make a mental note of like, this looks great. This is something I might try, like a couple bites, put a little bit on my plate, maybe get more if I need it, but you can survey that, make a mental plan, and then fill your plate with things. So I would also advise not skimping on protein, fiber, or fat. Those three things, that little trifecta is magic. When you eat foods that contain those things, it really helps you to feel more stable. You are able to recognize that fullness level a little bit more mindfully. You've become more satisfied between meals. So not skimping on those things, I would say, is also important. But when it comes to not wanting to waste food or seeing a lot of yummy things and just wanting to try that, I would always say start small. So if you start with a couple bites and then you actually realize this is something that I want a little bit more of, then you can flesh out that portion and go up for seconds instead of piling a lot of things on your plate, not really sure if you're going to like it or not. And then you kind of feel obliged to finish it just because you don't want to waste it. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, there's an interesting side corollary that goes along with that, which is the point that you made, JodieLynn. Well, somebody put in some time and effort on each one of these dishes. I should honor it. Mm-hmm. You know, that's basically giving your power away to somebody who made the meal. You may not even know who made the particular dish, but somebody did. You know?
Right, exactly. Yeah. And there's also an element of that, like guilt of not wanting to hurt somebody's feelings or not want to rock the boat in any way by turning away dessert or turning away a certain dish. So I would just say, like, you know, be as, like gentle as you can, but also being really serious about what boundaries you want to set and what precedents you want to set. Because if we continue to make choices that don't feel good, then we continue to prove to ourselves that we're more powerless or, you know, we're not in control. And so I think there is a way of blending the two where you're intentional about what you're eating. You set, you know, just a boundary with yourself. Like this doesn't, like at this point, this is when I don't feel good afterward. But also be, you know, kind to those who are making things and not wanting to waste that or hurt anybody's feelings. So I think that's why starting with a small amount and at least trying it helps to appease maybe others, without you signing yourself up for a large portion that then, doesn't like resonate or feel good or is in line with your goals. But yeah, it can be difficult. And I know that there can be a lot of people who have comments about that too. So I think having like a one-liner or a very simple, gentle, direct way of saying like, I'm making these certain food choices because I feel good and that's that. I think that can be helpful because sometimes people go into the holidays and they get these unwanted comments from a lot of people and it makes them, you know, feel a certain way and they start making choices that are more to appease other people than to kind of appease themselves.
Mm-hmm. I found that a lot around alcohol. Mm-hmm. I, you know, not completely stopped drinking, but a few years ago, just stopped drinking. And there was no intention, like no actual decision that I made. I just noticed that I don't feel like it. So I don't want to do it anymore. So I stopped doing it. And that was not my previous lifestyle. Yeah. So when that happened, everybody was like, you don't want a beer? What do you mean you don't want a beer? Well, just have a beer. Come on, just have a beer. Just have a drink. Come on. Like what, you don't want to hang out with us? I can hang out with you and I can drink water. I just don't feel like it. And now that it's been a few years, less people say less things, but I think that that's really difficult for people to address or to have a comment back. For me, like it was, you know, my family and I would just say something like, I'm good with water. I just don't feel like it. And then usually try and switch the subject. But are there some one-liners that maybe you can give to the people listening for comments like that of how you deflect them kindly or, set that boundary so you're not justifying something that you want to do to someone else.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's such a great point, and also so timely, because with food comes alcohol, and those two things really come together. And I think how we celebrate and, you know, in our culture, having champagne and wine and, you know, mixed drinks, that is just something that people do as a way to commemorate a moment or to really, you know, make the most of this moment. And that's difficult because it's so baked into our culture. And so when you start to make choices that are different from what you used to, I think it also starts to, like, kind of inadvertently, without you ever trying, is like holding up a mirror, and then they start to see their own decisions, and it kind of makes them question a little bit about what they're doing. Or maybe they feel like, oh, they're judging me now for making this choice because they're not drinking anymore, or they're too good for me or something. So it's difficult. And I'm also in that boat too. I don't really drink because it doesn't make me feel good. I get a headache every time, and it's just not worth it. So I also received a little bit of pushback, you know, when I was younger, but I just kept saying, I literally feel sick. I don't feel well, and I'm having an awesome time. So you don't have to worry about that. Like I'm living my best life. So I think just reiterating how you're feeling, people can't really argue with that, and just stand firm and do your very best to close that conversation and just carry on and not put more energy into it than what you're comfortable with. Because when we start to feed it, or if we start to waver or not feel as confident in our decisions, I think that can translate, and other people might pick up on that and start to press a little bit more. So just having a little bit of confidence and conviction behind your reason, and people don't have to understand it, but I do think it's important that they respect it. So yeah, it's hard, but I would just say it's awesome that you were able to, like, set that boundary and keep advocating for yourself. And like you said, the more that you do that, maybe it's just a couple times you see these people and you set the tone and you honor that and you really stand your ground, that by the fourth time, they're like, okay, whatever. They're having water. I'm having beer. We're still having a good time. Let's move on. So, yeah, it's tricky, but I think, you know, some people in the past have said that they're taking medication that also interacts with alcohol, which may not be true, but that's a very easy out where people are like, all right, I don't want you to be injured in any way or sick. So yeah, it's important to ruminate on that and just figure out, what do you feel comfortable with? But also, again, maintaining this decision that you feel good about.
Mm-hmm.
I'm reminded of when I stopped drinking when I was in my early 20s, and I'm reminded of what I experienced at that time. And I remember how this is all, I think there's a click that happens. There's a decision-making process that says, basically, I'm putting my interests first. And I think the way I phrased it to myself was, if I can't honor my own desire, how can I expect anybody else to? I have to honor it first.
Yeah.
And literally, that's what I expressed when somebody would bring up, you know, well, aren't you going to have something to drink? Well, no, actually, I need to honor my own desire not to drink alcohol. I got some, you know, flutters of the eyes and all that kind of stuff, but there was really nothing they could say, because if they were going to say anything at all, it was going to be insulting. And so they had to be quiet.
Totally. Yeah. And I think that really is what it boils down to, is making choices, like food choices, health choices, alcohol choices that actually serve you. And I know that sounds so simple, but if you really think about it, how many times are you making decisions to keep the peace with other people, or to match what other people are doing, just to, you know, just right, to fit in. You know, I was just having a conversation with a client the other day who's in my program, and she was saying for the first time she's going out to eat and actually making choices that allow her to walk away feeling awesome. And she's no longer questioning herself or no longer trusting herself. And I think what it really boils down to is, you know, so much of her life was making decisions for other people. And so it distanced herself from herself, right? She was quieting what her own mind or her body was telling her. But there's a cost that comes with that. So she just made the decision, like, this is my life. This is my body. This is my happiness. This is my energy. This is my health. Like, that's that, like, I am the only one who can protect that. And like you said, Walt, if I don't protect that, or if I don't honor that, then, no one else can do that for me. So I think it's just a decision and some mindset work that requires you to be really intentional about like, what do I want? What do I no longer want? And making sure that you have supportive people around you, because if you find people are just continue to bring you down or aren't making you feel very good about that, then that's also, not a reflection of you. It's more so just insight for you as well.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, well, I think we have a strategy at least that we can lean upon to help us navigate the holidays in an intelligent and body affirming way. But nevertheless, and you mentioned earlier that you don't actually like to encourage people to do dieting. You don't really like the whole dieting concept and so forth. But the truth is, there are a lot of people who really need to take pounds off. They feel like they need to take pounds off. And sometimes it's a pretty serious problem. I'm thinking
exactly.
My sister has had an issue tied basically. She has a significant weight issue, and it's tied to a fairly common prescription drug whose name I can't remember. It has to do with it's used for people who are having sleep deprivation conditions, and apparently, from what I understand from what she's told me, it builds up in the organs. I don't remember which organ, liver maybe, and it actually inhibits the body from releasing fat that's built up in the body. So that it becomes harder to lose weight. So there's an example of somebody who's, you could say she has a medical condition that makes it difficult / impossible to lose weight, right? And in fact, we've talked in the past year on the show. We've had other people on the show who are, weight loss issue experts and so forth. And we try to avoid talking about it in terms of weight loss. We talk about it in terms of healthy bodies. So we try to do the mindset thing, but it can still be kind of tough. So what do you do with somebody? I mean, you don't really want to put them on a diet. You want to help them change the mindset, but the mindset shift is tough. Plus they're dealing with a medical thing. How do you navigate that?
That's such a good question, and something that is very delicate, because I think there's, for people who do live in bigger bodies, everywhere they turn, they're being told they're not good enough or they need to lose weight ASAP. But there's also and I'm not I'm very informed that there are many cases where people medically need to lose weight in order to live like a healthy, vibrant life. And there's conditions that, make it very difficult for people to lose weight. And so again, this idea of like eating less and exercising more, that is very flawed for a number of reasons. So what I typically do is when I take somebody in who wants to feel better in their body, who knows that they feel more confident and comfortable at a lower weight, we first spend a lot of time focusing on why they want to do that. Is it for them or is it for other people? And we also focus on a game plan around how to do it in a way where we can sustain it. Because oftentimes when we hear about a diet, anytime you hear a diet that's promising a lot very quickly, that's a massive red flag. You want to run away, because that is not necessarily going to allow for you to sustain that weight loss. What's not very sexy is slow and steady weight loss. So we then figure out a game plan of losing it in a very gradual, sustainable way, so they never have to get to the point where they have to worry about this again. And then we also take a look at all these variables that could be impacting their weight and their metabolism. So oftentimes, if you're not sleeping well, that is such an easy area to focus on to support your metabolism, to support your hormones, to make it a lot easier for your body to let go of unnecessary weight. So there's some data around how just one night of inconsistent sleep can affect that hormone, that it helps you feel full to the point where you can eat up to 600 extra calories than you did the day before. And that's that's you listening to your body. If you're hungry, then, you want to eat, obviously. But just looking at sleep and how can we make sure that you're getting uninterrupted, solid sleep as often as possible. So that's one pillar. Another is looking at stress and managing your emotions and making sure that you're not making food decisions out of an emotional place. And then we figure out how can we make sure that you're self-regulating in a way that feels really good, that you have enough options there without leaning on food as much. So that's a big part of it too. Thinking about improving their relationship with movement and exercise and not doing it in a way to punish themselves, but doing it in a way where it helps them feel energized and feel better in their bodies. So yeah, I could go on and on. There's so many different little avenues that we take in. What I like to think about is like pulling all these pieces together, creating this puzzle, and basically giving your body every fighting chance at letting go of unnecessary weight that just doesn't have to be there. So if we focus on nourishing your body and not depriving it, like giving it, your protein, your fats, your fiber, your vitamins, your minerals, your antioxidants, giving your body and your cells what it needs to thrive, and then being really mindful about those other moments when you want a soda or you want cake or you want ice cream that we know is not very health promoting, but we do want to incorporate that because when we go to extremes, we know that backfires, right? So having a plan around being intentional about non-nutritious food, and then, mindset work and behavioral change, that all these things really come together. And the last thing I'll say on this is there's so much emphasis on losing weight and getting on a scale. And if we don't see the number we want, then we spiral or we say, screw it, this isn't working. But instead, if you can not put as much focus on the weight and just focus on the inputs, what are the things that we know help your body operate in a better way, then the weight almost always just comes off. So while I don't, we don't obsess about calories. We don't obsess about getting on the scale, but so many of my clients are like, it's been 3 months. I feel the best I've ever felt. And by the way, I'm down 3 pant sizes and I'm not even trying. So it's just a slightly different way of looking at it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. Well, I'm also reminded too that my sister was telling me that she did end up resolving the sleep issue. And the way it happened, it was kind of ironic the way it happened, because her MD tested her a number of things, including calcium, and said no, she wasn't calcium deficient. But she ended up talking to a holistic practitioner. I think it may have been in India, naturopathic, but I'm not sure of that, who said, I'm not so sure of that. She tested, she says, oh no, what MDs accept as being sufficient calcium is not sufficient. We need to get you on more calcium. So she started getting natural calcium, and the sleep problem went away. But the weight issue remained because of what had happened with that medication. And apparently, even though she's off the medication, it has hung around in her body. So even if the way now I have to take her at her word. I don't really know, but she says she eats a healthy diet. She doesn't eat a lot of snacks and all that kind of thing. And yet the pounds are still not coming off. That becomes really highly frustrating. And
definitely,
also, what do you do at that point?
Right. Yeah. Well, I think there's a couple of ways that you can support the liver function, and putting some effort and attention there, knowing that the liver had to manage a lot and perhaps it's just not functioning the way that it used to. And the other thing is, while we do want changes and we want to see results very quickly, sometimes these things just take a little bit of time to correct themselves. And so, I think there's a number of ways that she could continue to, support her body and give, again, her liver every opportunity to function better, and doing a lot of the basics well. As time goes on, she might, be able to test her liver function and just see that things are trending in the right direction. It just might take a little bit of time. And if you think about your liver, it's the powerhouse of so many things in the body. And so if that's a little clogged, if that's not working well, then it can create this ripple effect. And so it might just require a little bit of time, and strategy to make sure that, organs are functioning well, and also just giving herself, a little grace too. Cause I know how frustrating that is when people are doing everything they can, but there's one thing that could be limiting them from, let's say, losing weight. And, there's a lot of judgment that they can receive from other people when really they're like, I'm doing everything. Okay. Like I'm trying.
Yeah. Do you support, like heavy metal or parasite or liver or whatever cleanses as well in your practice? Do you think that's a good idea?
I think there's definitely a time and a place for that. It's very untraditional for like MDs to typically test for those things or to, help individuals navigate that. But I do think there are a lot of cases where they might be doing a lot of the basics well. They might be focusing on, this is the other thing that I want to say around weight loss is also gut health. And we understand that there's definitely bacteria and different organisms that can increase our propensity for weight, and others that can help us lose weight. And so they've done these like fecal transplants with different rats who have different microbiota. And they find that when they do that fecal transplant, the weight that this one rat was having a hard time losing, suddenly it's just falling off. So I think, there's all these different ways of approaching like a strong, vibrant health. And I think there's definitely cases where looking at certain types of cleanses, and looking for parasites and doing stool tests, that there's so much insight you can gain there. But what I would say is, you want a little bit of data to work with before jumping on some kind of cleanse. Oftentimes we can get excited or see like this at-home cleanse, but that can sometimes create more problems afterward. And so I would just say doing a little bit of diagnostic testing to make sure that you are targeting something and it's not just kind of a generalized blanket treatment is also very important.
Yeah. Totally makes sense.
We answered your question so thoroughly, you don't even have a follow-up. I'm kind of shocked.
Well, I have other questions.
Well, go for it. I mean, you jump in. It's all right.
We can switch, not necessarily directions, but to focus in a way. I want to hear more about nutrition, how to nourish your body and what that looks like in our world of food today and all of that. Like, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I think, I mean, nutrition to me is like one of the most powerful areas of our health and our wellness and what we really need to be focusing on. I mean, it has the power to add years to your life. It has the power to, like, unfortunately, like, decrease your lifespan. We know that most chronic disease that is lifestyle based is often driven by, nutrition. And that's also not to say that, it's a very conscious, easy decision. I think there's like food equity and having access to whole, fresh food that's affordable is also a massive problem. But I think food is like one of the most instrumental players in helping you feel alive. And that's really what I want people to walk away with is knowing like food is on your side. It is there to help you get more out of every single day. And I also think it should taste good too. So, there's definitely some core pieces we want to focus on. As I mentioned earlier, having adequate protein. I mean, that could be 25 to 35 grams of protein per meal, 10 to 15 for snacks. I mean, there's, again, have to personalize it to the individual, but giving your body enough protein to work with so that every cell in your body can function well, allowing adequate fat and those fat sources that are ideally those unsaturated or omega-3 rich fats. And typically those things come from plants. So your nuts, your seeds, avocado, olives, olive oil, avocado oil, of course, fatty fish like your salmon, herring, trout, mackerel, all those good things that for a lot of people who have a history of dieting or cutting calories, they're afraid of eating fats. But fat is absolutely essential in helping you feel amazing. It helps you feel satisfied at each meal. It helps you stabilize your blood sugars so you feel more energetic. It helps actually lose abdominal weight and your brain health, your brain function, your memory, all those important things. You need to have fats. So giving yourself permission to enjoy those foods that are a little bit more satiating. And then, of course, fiber. I think that is also something that most of us are not eating enough of. So most Americans are having less than half of the amount of fiber that they should every single day. And fiber is also like the unsung hero of all things relating to health and wellness. So it supports your gut. It helps also maintain those energy levels, those blood sugars. And fiber is found in most or many plant foods, especially the whole version of those things. So your beans, your lentils, your nuts, your seeds, your avocado, your whole grains, quinoa, amaranth, buckwheat, all those good things. And so I think we can get into a habit of eating the same things all the time, but also expanding your palate, expanding your variety of food, allowing for more nutrition to show up is also a great way to think about things. So your taste buds stay engaged. And you can think about every food as having its own unique profile of macronutrients and micronutrients and value. And so the more you expand and allow for more variety of food to show up, it's almost like you're crossing off all these boxes on your list. You're giving your body all these new awesome nutrients that help your brain and your liver and your heart and your, immune system and your digestion, all those things, a chance at just operating at a better level. And so, yeah, I mean, I could go on and on. I just love nutrition. I think it's amazing. There are some principles that a lot of people can very easily focus on to make the decision making easier around food, to make meal planning easier, to make more intentional choices about snacks. And I think once you get into the habit of having this repertoire of insight and then this repertoire of snacks and meals, it just makes your life so much easier. It takes a lot of the guessing out of it.
One thing that I wanted to mention, it just occurred to me, that I recently experimented with and found a lot of success. Like I'm single. I used to be married. I'm single now. So I'm getting back into the single lifestyle and learning how to, make sure I always have my meals planned exactly right for one person, not for two or more or anything like that. There's a whole thing that's involved in that.
Sure.
And one of the things that I've struggled with, that I'm sure other people do too, is, okay, so what am I going to have for dinner for tonight and tomorrow night and the next night? And what am I going to have for lunch? Or what's my breakfast going to be? Planning out the menu. I found a really great way to plan that. Well, not necessarily to plan it, but at least give me ideas about it. And that's to use artificial intelligence, ChatGPT and Google Bard and so forth. You just go to it, you type in, give me a 7-day, 3 meals a day, 21 meals, map out a whole menu for me for the next week. And it does it in about 10 seconds flat. And then you say, well, no, I don't want Brussels sprouts. So it takes the Brussels sprouts. I mean, it literally just fits it. It customizes it exactly to what you want really, really fast. So I wanted to mention that, like, guys, if you're trying to figure out, how to put your menu together, use the AI. It's wonderful for that.
Yeah, I think that's such a great call out. And that's something that I advise all the time, is you can add as much specificity around that. So if you can say, I don't like these foods, I want to make sure I have, 30 grams of protein per meal. I, want to incorporate enough fiber, like whatever language you can use to make sure that those are balanced so that you're getting as much value out of it and you walk away feeling energized. It makes your life so much easier. So I think that is such a great hack and a gift for sure.
Yeah, I love
Absolutely.
that.
I was looking on your website earlier. Do you have a cookbook available, or I think you had some like recipes or something? Maybe I saw. I don't know.
Yeah. So I do. I have like this almost like a workbook that I've put together of tons of meals and snacks that I've vetted, brands that I've looked through that kind of meet my criteria, that are very wholesome and nourishing and that actually taste good. So yeah, I have lots of options.
That's
really
amazing.
Good. You also have a program, don't you? You have I think it's called From Restriction to Food Freedom. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So that has been, it's the most excited I've ever been about anything I've created. It's really like a culmination of my 10 years practicing as a, health coach and a dietitian. And I've really put together this 3-month program that helps people who have struggled with dieting or weight loss, or anyone who's felt overwhelmed with what to eat and really how to create sustainable changes. It is like the one-stop shop. So it's a hybrid of one-on-one coaching with me, along with on-demand modules that you can watch at any time. You can repeat watching them. And it's all about helping you master healthy eating habits, a balanced mindset and relationship with food and your body, so that you really feel successful and you set yourself up for success far beyond our time together. Because I think there's a lot of programs where people might feel like they need to depend on a person or the program in order to have success. But I want people to feel amazing. So they never have to worry about their weight. They never have to worry about what they're eating. They feel confident and empowered. So I'm really excited about it. And I have some slots that I'm opening up for the new year, but you can definitely start sooner than that if you're eager. It's been a passion project, but something I'm like very, very excited about.
So what kind of commitment are we talking about here? Is this like a lifetime commitment, or is this, something I'm doing for a year, or what is this?
Yeah. So it's actually 3 months. So, I have people who are, halfway through it and they've said it's the best that they've ever felt. And these are people who have tried a lot of different things. So it's really a combination of nutrition education, behavioral change, repairing your relationship with food, better understanding how to navigate difficult situations, traveling. It's very comprehensive, and it is a 3-month commitment. So it's kind of every week there's either a module or a one-on-one coaching session with me. And it's just a nice blend blend of, trainings and education and some support. So yeah, it's 3 months. They have access to it for 4 months if they ever want to look through any more content or ask any more questions. But I also help people understand how to nourish their bodies better by looking at their food intake and just offering suggestions that help them feel more satisfied and better. So it's not about counting calories or obsessing about anything. It's really making your life easier and more stress-free. That's the goal.
What was the hybrid aspect? Was that deliberate? In other words, combining some time with you, some time with the modules, basically giving the power to, this is what it sounds like to me, giving power to the person you're helping so that they're basically taking control, but they're getting, needed guidance along the way where they need a little support.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's helping them better understand how to be more self-sufficient and to trust and to listen to their body and to just look at food in a different way. And yeah, I think there's so many tools and insights that they can take away from this. And I just want them to have more options or more tools in their toolkit to navigate real life. And yeah, so it's exciting. I love it. I'm really, really passionate about it.
That's really great. Yeah, we can hear the passion too in your voice. No doubt about that. So somebody wants to, maybe they want to find out about the program. Maybe they just want to find out more about what you have to say, what you have to offer. Maybe, I don't know if that's the only coaching you do. Do you do a full coaching? I don't even know what you do. If they want to find out about you, how do they find you?
Absolutely. Great question. So I also just offer one-on-one coaching as well. So if their needs are slightly different or they want to personalize it even more and they don't necessarily want to jump into the program, that I also offer that as well. I'm also very active on Instagram. So my handle is Maura, Maura.wellness. If you ever want to just get lots of free advice and guidance and support there. And then you can also reach out via my email, which I don't know if they'll have access to that, but I'm happy to share that as well.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we can and I can put stuff into the show notes too. I'll make sure I'll link to your website. So we'll get that in there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Because we want to make it as easy as possible for people.
Yeah. That's the goal. Got to simplify these days,
Yeah, there's so much information that we're dealing with. We have to simplify. Otherwise, what was I going to do? I don't even remember what I was going to do. Oh, there's a note here. Good. Okay. Here I go.
Right. Exactly.
Okay. So JodieLynn, I got to ask you, right? So we've had this conversation. You've started off by framing it by saying how much, my words, it was kind of a guilt trip going through the holidays. Do you feel like it's less of a guilt trip now?
I feel more empowered. I think that my biggest takeaway from today is this mindset that we have in society around scarcity of food. And it's with everything, not just the holidays, but like you go out to a restaurant and, I'm here, so I might as well get the fries and the gravy and the cheese and all of the things, and really allowing yourself to let go of that and see the abundance that we have with food, and how I love how you put it, Maura, that, food is on our side. Food is designed to help us thrive. So those were my big takeaways today. And I'm excited to go into the holidays and see what I can learn, not only about myself and the way that I view food, but how I can take a look at the food that's, at that buffet and say, okay, how can this nourish me? And how can I really have an experience with it here and now?
Yeah. Well, it certainly is helping me because, like I said, I'm in the process. I've been doing this for like the last year, but in the last 3 weeks, I've really been thinking about making some significant changes in my dietary structure. Not so much for the purpose of losing weight. My weight's actually pretty good, but more about, just improving the healthiness of the food without making it taste lousy.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Life is too short for average food or boring food. Right. Like if you have the option for it to taste better, I'd go with that,
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, I love that. And I thank you for both sharing that. I think it's neat to also think about how just a few small changes can be so meaningful. So this is also for any listeners, if you're overwhelmed or if you're like, I don't know where to start, a little trick that you can try is just writing down what are 3 things that you want to improve upon. Let's say 3 goals. Of those 3, what are 2 that, feel most doable or most realistic and the least amount of stress? And then of those 2, which one is going to create the biggest impact in this moment? And so that can help you really narrow down what action to take, and then just allowing a little bit of change over time. Or maybe you're ready for a big overhaul, but also don't underestimate the small choices either.
I just realized we're talking about food, diet, we're talking about intake, and we're talking about taking small bites.
On brand, isn't it?
Normally it's just a metaphor. It's like, no, it's actually a simile. It's the real thing this time.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I love that. Well, thank you so much for taking this time, joining us, sharing some of this really cool stuff. I like the mindset. I like the way that you're treating it. We're not treating it as diet anymore. We're just treating it as this is what we need in order to live and thrive. How can I maximize that?
Totally.
That changes the whole thing around. That's a completely different conversation at that point.
It is. Like, I never even use the word diet. We don't talk about calories because it's so much bigger than that. And I think when you start to understand that, things just click. Like, it really does. It feels so much more effortless when you're like, wait a second, how do I want to feel today? How do I want to go to bed feeling? How do I want to wake up feeling? And what choices can I make that just align with that? And then you naturally start to find, okay, this food feels good. This food doesn't really feel good. This amount of food feels really good. This amount doesn't feel very good. So you almost like, you become in the driver's seat of your decisions. And it doesn't have to be extreme. It doesn't have to be around dieting. But I do think like this slightly new approach can just have a very impactful way of just changing how you think about yourself, how you think about food, how you think about your body, so that you're just not stressing about things as much as time goes on.
Now we just got to figure out a way to get the medical society at large to stop thinking about what you do as being a dietitian and turn it into another term. I mean, is there a better term? A nutritionist? I don't know. What would you, if you could change the title, what would you call it?
Yeah. I mean, I think some blend of nutritionist or integrative health coach. It's hard to really put an exact name to it, like language to it. I mean, as a dietitian, that is like it's kind of go through similar training as a nurse does, but anyone can call themselves a nutritionist. So that's also something that I would advise listeners just to be mindful of. Anyone can call themselves a health coach or nutritionist. There's no licensure around that. So you just want to make sure if you are working with somebody that they do have like clinical training or at least like, certifications in some way, because you also don't want to messing with your body is a big deal too. And there's a lot that, you just want to take care of yourself, I guess is what I'm saying. But yeah, I would say like an integrative nutritionist, maybe that could be kind of a fun term.
I think they just need to change it to something. They got to take the word diet out.
I know.
So that we change that conversation.
Right. Yeah, I know. I call myself a non-dieting dietitian. So it's
good way to do it. I like that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. And thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Awesome.